Shalom again, everybody. Today is the first day of Nisan, the first day of the calendar Jewish year. So, Happy New Year, Shana Tova, and Shabbat Shalom. Last time we talked about the Matovu prayer as the prayer that we came into the synagogue. So what I'd like to do is sort of contrast two models of things that could happen when you go into synagogue. One would be you go in, you schmooze while everybody's getting ready. The rabbi hasn't gotten up to the bima yet. While you're schmoozing, you grab a Tallit and toss it over your shoulders and schmooze a little bit more, and then eventually things quiet down, and away we go.
Wait.
Are you allergic to cats?
Oh, he's very friendly, but I'm sorry. Okay.
Cat went on her lap, standing.
So that's
Wait, one of you schmooze and the other's
that's the schmooze model. That's
I love that.
You walk in,
Absolutely.
everybody's friendly, you're just kind of talking, you throw the tallit around your shoulders, then the service starts, and maybe Matovu is the first prayer, and then the morning blessings. Maybe that's familiar. Okay, but that's not the model that the rabbis who put the Siddur together had in mind. And we know that, among other things, by what we talked about 2 weeks ago with the Matovu. So if you remember some of the things that in this very short Matovu prayer, just to highlight, and you're not, we're not looking, that's not what's in front of you. I forgot we should say that blessing first. So let's say thank you for picking that up so that to remind me that we needed to do that first. So let's say I just launched right in instead of saying the prayer before studying Torah. So let's say that. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'arev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'fi'emcha beit Yisrael v'yineh anachnu v'tze'atzaenu v'tze'atza'ei amcha beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratcha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai hamlamed Torah L'amo Yisrael. Okay, so what, if you remember from 2 weeks ago, what is the Matovu prayer that we talked about then about? And you remember any themes? And I'm really thinking about emotions. What were the I'm really looking for sort of emotional themes. What do we feel, or what might we feel when we talked about
it was the curse that came out as a blessing.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing.
Okay.
Balaam was supposed to curse the Israelites as they spread out in their tents, but he was unable to say those words because God directed his mouth for this prayer of blessing rather than a curse.
Okay, so he looked and he saw the assemblage and it was beautiful and okay. Anything, what else? Goes on from there.
Something about, I will enter into your dwelling place, O Lord.
Right.
And then my translation of the Hebrew stops.
Okay, so I'll just, I just wanted to sort of set the scene so we can go on to today's topic. So the prayer goes on, Va'ani beroch hastecha avo vetecha. I enter your house a house of great kindness, unconditional love. So that's one emotion. And then I bow down reverently before your holy shrine in awe. So we have this idea of reverence and this wonderful house we're entering. I offer my prayer. I hope it's at a good time. God, in your great mercy, save me with your redemptive truth. So what I'm getting at here is as contrasted to the model of we just sort of go in, throw our tallits on, and then start.
No, the schmoozing is the very important part.
Okay. So another the Siddur model, the traditional model, maybe after the schmoozing, would be as we come into the shul and we say this prayer to ourselves, we are preparing ourselves for these ideas of reverence, holiness, awe, a beautiful assemblage. In other words, our spirits are already being moved in this wonderful, beautiful place of salvation and connection with God. That's the first, in the 10 seconds or whatever it takes to say the Ma Tohu prayer, we're already sort of in a different place than we were when we walked in the door, okay, emotionally. All right, so now then the Siddur goes to the Tallit blessing, which under the Shmooze model was already done. We just threw it over our shoulders. We didn't say anything. It was just sort of, this is the uniform. We put it on. Now let's go. Okay, all right. Well, so now I'd like to talk about the non-Shmooze model, where we've just already prepared ourselves with this Ma Tohu prayer, and we're thinking about reverence and awe and meeting God. That's a kind of schmooze, I guess, but a little bit of a different one. So before we dive right into the Tallit blessing, I want to ask you what you think the Tallit is for. What's it about? Why do we put on this strange thing with the funny strings on it?
It's a commandment, isn't it, to wear the Tallit?
Because
I know it.
The fringes.
The fringes.
And it means
To
something.
remind us of the
And it has
613 commandments.
And have the
Right.
string
I
of
was gonna
blue
say
in
it
it.
means something, but I don't know what they mean.
Okay. And is there some other time during the service that we refer to that? Do you know?
During the lines after the Shema.
Oh.
The third paragraph that we're supposed to say after the Shema that gets omitted in their prayer book.
Oh, is that right?
Okay. Well, actually, you're
we
absolutely
got?
right. I meant to bring a Mishkan Tefillah down
Well,
with me.
yeah.
You've got one. You've got one.
I've got a
don't
Mishkan
you?
Tefillah, yeah.
Mishkan
Okay.
Tefillah is
So,
not in there.
not in there, but
it is
here's
actually,
the
because I
Siddur
just
Class
photocopied it out of there.
Where is the third paragraph fully in?
Well, okay, so let's pass this around. And
What page?
How many
200,
6.
I have 8 of them. 236, assuming that we have the same edition, because I might be using a draft edition.
Okay, I think we all have one.
Has everybody got one?
Let's check it out.
Okay, so wait, before you look at it, don't look at it.
Well, I
Don't look at the English.
Oh.
Don't look at the English for a moment. Okay, but this is a little exercise we're going to do. Okay, because we say this in Hebrew, as Steve said during the Shema. So I want to just sort of go through this with you as if we were doing it in a service, and then see if it means anything to you as it's done, as we've been doing. And of course, eventually we'll get to the Shema and we'll study it, but this is a lead into the
I have a
Tallit.
question to ask, because I think of reform as something that, for people like me, who don't really know Hebrew, should the services be in English, more English than Hebrew?
Okay, well, that's a good question.
They used to.
First of all, it's up to according to the Reform movement, everything is up to the rabbi as the leader of the congregation, and in our community we tend to do more Hebrew, and many other Reform services do have more English than we typically
I just
do.
want to add this, because living in Virginia, when my kids went to and had bar mitzvah, everything was done in English. Everything, not reading from the Torah, obviously, but I'm talking about the services. There was at least 99% English rather than Hebrew, and I just wondered, and when I came out here, I said, what are we, in conservative?
What's delightful about the way we do things is you can go to a synagogue anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
No, I know.
And you can pray the exact same service as long as you know the Hebrew.
I don't understand the Hebrew either, but to me, I really have to like the Hebrew. It gives me a feeling of connection.
And you
See,
simply
and I
read the
think for me
translation at the
it's the
same
opposite.
time.
Even
for
though
me,
I
it's
don't know
just the
Hebrew.
opposite.
Okay,
Okay.
well, hold on, let's...
From having been on the Religious Practices Committee.
Okay,
Yeah.
Marilyn, hold on, because everybody's...
They know
Okay,
the
we're a small group, but since Dave raised his hand first.
Okay.
I think you're talking more of what I would refer to as classic reform, where you
Absolutely.
went. Because as a kid in Tucson, at Temple Emmanuel, I mean, it was all English, no Tallits,
Right.
no kippahs, an organ,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was interesting because I went there a couple months ago and went to the Friday night service, and it was just like ours here, which I thought was
You
great.
won't find that at Our Lady of
Because
Emmanuel in New
it's
York.
swinging. I think
Right.
It's a
today
swing to the
it
right.
is swinging very much more
Yes, definitely.
to,
And we're going to see that actually in some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. Yeah, well, Barton McQuaid,
After
Marilyn?
Marilyn.
Okay, what I was going to say is that, first of all, Temple Beth Tikva went reform rather than conservative by one vote. Okay, that's the history of the temple. And the amount of Hebrew in the service has always been a sort of a working between the rabbi and the religious practices committee that also had involved with the songs that were used. But I see that as I agree with you, in reform as a whole, there's been now more of a swing towards observance, a swing towards the right, a swing more towards the observance and the teaching of, for example, kashrut, even though our temple is not completely kosher. So that it's one way in one synagogue has very much to do with what the mores and customs of that synagogue. From this synagogue, for as long as I've belonged to it, and I think you guys have belonged longer.
84.
Yeah.
When did you join?
87.
Okay, so we're the, and Anne, when did you join?
73.
Oh, she's been there the
But
longest.
I never went. I used to just drop my children off. and went to
Oh,
my
no, don't.
There's always been, as I'm sure you all
Yes.
remember, a considerable amount of Hebrew
Right.
in the Friday night and Saturday morning prayers. I mean, that's what struck Mel and me. We had come out of a conservative temple, and while he had up until more recently, a comfort level with Beth Tikva, is because of the amount of Hebrew that was used.
Well, let me say, Carol, I think this has been a struggle for all the movements, except maybe the Orthodox, because on the one hand, of course, you want people to understand what they're saying and not feel disconnected. On the other hand, we have a tradition for thousands of years. This is our language. This is our national language. Our prayers are in this language. They lose things in translation. We want our children to connect with the text, and so what do you do? And of course, transliteration is one attempt to bridge that gap. There's arguments that it's a bad thing because then people won't learn Hebrew, or it's a good thing because then people can at least pronounce the words. And Kabbalistically, there's also the idea that if you go back to Bereshit, for Genesis, God created the world with words. And the idea is that the language itself is holy. And the words themselves are structured in such a way as to affect us and affect the world. And if we don't say the prayers in Hebrew, then we're not accomplishing one of the objectives of prayer.
But the thing is, and you have to remember this, that you want to understand what you're saying. And I do not understand Hebrew. And I'm not going to take a class in language was my worst subject. So I'm not going to take that. When I did my B'nai Mitzvah, I memorized, because I'm great at memorizing, but I didn't know I couldn't translate it. And I'm used to a place, and we always joke about it, like in New York, Our Lady of Emmanuel. Everything's in English.
Well, so one could ask.
Are they still like that though, I wonder?
Oh, I'm sure. I am sure.
One could ask: is this a failing of Jewish education?
Yes.
Our children should grow up at least knowing what the prayers mean.
But that was
But-
never
No,
happened.
that's not-
Well,
never
it should.
Even
I
as
say.
old as I am, you do pick up a few Hebrew
That's why
sayings
I
here and
teach
there.
translation of Torah rather than Torah
Okay.
when I'm upset.
Okay, so this is an important conversation, but let's
not about
let's go back here. So I'm going to chant this. It's not very long, but it's in the familiar trope that we sing it in services.
Torah trope.
And you can do it with me if you want, and then I'm going to stop and we'll see what it means. Vayomer Adonai El Moshe Lemor. Okay, what does that mean? So God said to Moses, saying, Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem So speak to the children of Israel and say to them, V'asu lahem tzitzit, and make for them, or you shall make for them tzitzit, whatever tzitzit are, fringes, okay. Al kanfei vigdehem ledoratam, on the corners of their garments for in their generations, or for all time, okay. V'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf patel techelet, and put the tzitzit on a thread of purple, a strand of purple, I guess you could say. V'chaya lachem tzitzit, and it will be for them fringes, uritem oto, and they will see them. Uzartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, and they will be reminded, you will be reminded of all the mitzvot of God, v'asitem otam, and do them. V'lo taturu acharei levavechem v'acharei einechem, and you will not be tempted to go astray after other gods. Asher atem zonim acharechem, and you know what the word zona is?
A zona
Prostitute.
is a whore.
Okay, so this act literally means you won't go whoring after these other gods. Okay, lema'an tiskaru vasitem et kol mitzvotai, so that you will remember them, all of the mitzvot, all the commandments. V'tem kedoshim l'Elohechem, and you will be holy to your God. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher chatzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I'm the God who took you out of Egypt. Lechiyot lachem le'Elohim, to be your God. Ani Elohechem. Okay, I am the true God. So we are saying in this Shema, or V'ahavta, part of the Shema prayer, we are saying specifically about what this Tallit is for. The Tallit is really the garment that holds the fringes. It's all about the fringes.
I have a question. The Orthodox men at Chabad that I've seen wear a special type of undershirt with the fringes,
Right.
and they have the fringes outside. And it strikes me that what this is describing is that kind of always worn during the day,
Okay.
when you're up, garment, as opposed to a talit.
Very good. So there are two kinds of, the Tallit just means garment. So as you point out, there are two kinds. There's the Tallit Katan and the Tallit Gadol. The Tallit Katan is like a poncho, and it's worn under your shirt, like I'd be wearing it, maybe an undershirt,
Yes.
then that on top of it. And the seat traditionally, although it's not required, stick out. It's actually, it's really, although it says to see them, that's also rabbinically accounts to feel them. But you wear this at least during the day. Some wear it 24 hours. And then they put it on top of that. Okay, so we don't, at least for the last few centuries, we have not typically worn those. As you say, the Orthodox will, so this Tallit Gadol has evolved as a substitute for that. The blessing over the putting on the Tallit Katan is not wrapping. We're going to get into this in a few minutes, but not wrap yourself around. But it's just al mitzvat tzitzit. You say, Brachat Adonai, etc., regarding the mitzvah of tzitzit. That's the blessing when you put the Tallit Katan on, because you're not wrapping yourself. That's what you do with the Tallit Gadol.
Okay, and this does not pertain to women.
Okay, so, all right, so now we're going to get into
Actually, women are forbidden.
No,
in
no, well,
Orthodoxy
no.
from wearing that.
That is not the case. The
In Haredim they are.
well,
Well, that's
okay,
a
so you have to say who are you saying is forbidding it and for whom. And actually, I didn't for the tefillin blessings. I intend to go into at more length what the halacha is, but for regarding women. But the short version is that you have, as you know, the time-bound mitzvot.
Right, and women
And
are
it is
exempt
not
from them.
well, exempted, but not forbidden from performing them, only exempted from having to perform them. So my position, well, we'll talk about, okay, I'm going to give you the authorities. You can make your own determination next time, 2 weeks. I'll give you the authorities, but certainly at least the more lenient, and I think the majority view is that women can do the mitzvot that are not time-bound. And I certainly think that applies to Tallit.
And one of the
No.
issues with regards to the
But
Tallit,
you're referring to the really
But-
Orthodox, though. He's not. I don't think you're referring.
Yeah,
to
but there are a growing proportion of the population in Israel.
Okay,
I
go-
know.
but we're-
one of the issues with regards to Tallit, and this prayer in particular, that goes back to my background as being a member of a conservative congregation. The only thing we didn't have a mechitza, otherwise it would have been Orthodox.
Wait, so women didn't have aliyahs and they didn't dance with a Torah?
They could not come up on the bima. Okay,
can't
but it was
remember
conservative.
that.
We were a United Synagogue. Anyway, one of the traditions that I was taught was that when you say this prayer, actually before you say the Shema, you gather up the four corners of the Tallit, wrap them around your finger, and when you say the Shema, you're holding the Tallit up to your
Yes.
head so that your eyes
Okay.
you can't see.
All right.
But then when you say this particular prayer, each time you say the word tzitzit, you kiss the tzitzit.
Right. We will.
And I bet you only men wore
We
the
will
Yes.
we will when we eventually get to the Shema, we'll talk about the rituals, the choreography, and actually today I do want to talk about the choreography of putting on the Tallit, because there is a choreography to that.
So when did women start wearing tallits in the Reform and the conservative movement? I wasn't given a
Oh,
tallit.
not
at
in-
my bat
okay.
mitzvah.
Well,
not in
as-
conservative for a
okay,
long,
well,
long
first
time.
of all,
It's
as
Reformed
Dave
first.
mentioned earlier, and we're going to talk about it also.
Okay, the conservative
It wasn't long ago that the Reform movement said no Tallit and no
Right.
kippah. Okay, so and now we're creeping back. But let's hold that. Dave,
Just could tell a little anecdote.
okay.
Great story, as many of you know, Frank Sinatra was very close to the Jewish community and had many Jewish friends, very active. And he came to a bar mitzvah in Hollywood, and when he walked in, he was the only person in the shul that was wearing a kippah.
That's great. That is great.
That is a good story.
Well, I have heard stories of people going in and being told,
to
that
take
we
it
don't,
off.
we don't
Yes,
do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Classical.
Okay,
classical reform.
so here are the blessings before and after. They are very short, but there's a
think
tremendous amount.
Oh, wait a minute. It's
in
stuck
them.
together. Here's more.
Yeah, they're stapled. Okay, so let's go back to so now Anne, all of us, we can see that in the Shema we are talking directly about the Tallit and the Tzitzit. Okay, and this is where this comes from. All right, but now we have under the model I suggested, the alternative schmooze model, we have already sort of shifted to the idea of we've come into this holy place and we're thinking reverence and chesed and awe, and now we are getting ready to put on the Tallit. Okay, so what is the first thing that we say before we put it on? Anybody want to read the Hebrew, or shall I read that? Any volunteers? Okay, so David, you want to? Okay.
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
Barchi nafshi et Adonai. Adonai Elohai gadolta mod. Hod v'hadar lavashta otehu hor kasalma note shamaim.
One more word.
Oh, Kiyariyat.
Very good. Okay.
Riyadh.
So we've come into the synagogue, and we've already got this idea of reverence and awe and this being this holy place, and we're about ready to start this dialogue with God, and we want to comply with the mitzvah of the commandment of wearing the fringes, which are going to remind us of all the commandments. That's the purpose. That's what we just read. I mean, we wouldn't have read it in the service yet, but we know from having just looked at what it says in the Shema that it's all about reminding us continuously of all the commandments. Okay, so that's why we're praying. I mean, we're praying wearing the Tallit because we're doing all this in the context of being reminded of the commandments, and especially in this holy place. This is the covenant that we have with God. We're complying with the commandments.
In actuality, when the men in our temple put on the tallit, do they say this prayer?
I can only say that under the model that I suggested, it doesn't seem so. Each person, I guess, would have to answer that for themselves. But just from observation, it seems like no, they're just putting it on because that's what you do before you start services.
Wouldn't it be
Well,
beautiful
the
to
only
put
one
it
I do
together
is-
in unison?
There's no sort of meditation or contemplation or appreciation
There's
that
no
I'm
thought
doing
about
it.
it.
The only
Yeah,
one I
which
say
is a
while
shame.
putting on the
Yeah,
tallit.
It's a shame.
Okay, it's a shame.
The
Okay,
one that's actually
so
on the
all right, so
tallit.
let's look at what this is that we've just said. Okay, bless my soul, bless Adonai. So remember, those of you who are in the Musar class, I've been saying several times already, what are we? We're souls with bodies. Okay, so we're starting by approaching this with where the soul in us should bless God, because after all, we already feel this reverence, this awe in this holy place that we're in. Adonai, my God, you are very great. You have donned majesty and glory. And you have, and this is really interesting, Ote or Chasalma, you've donned light like a garment. What is that about? You have donned light, you're wearing light like a garment. You're stretching out the heavens like a curtain. So here we have this imagery which relates, and where does this language come from? You think some rabbi made it up? No. It comes, like much of our liturgy, from Psalms. So Psalm 104 actually presents a different view of the creation of the universe. You know, we have Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. Well, we also have in Psalms the idea of God wrapped in a robe of light, spreading out the heavens, establishing the earth, making rivers gush, and it goes on and on. It's a beautiful psalm, and this sentence evokes this alternative view of creation that we get in Psalms. Completely lost to us because we don't know the Psalms. But if you had a good Jewish, including me, if you had a good Jewish education and you studied the Psalms when you were, then suddenly you just seeing these words would bring back this whole imagery of God, standing on a mountain, maybe cloaked in light, and doing all these incredible things. And so our reference to this, why do we say this? Because it's in a way like putting on the Tallit is almost like recreating God's act of creation in a way. We are putting on this robe of light in the same way that Psalms characterizes God as having created the world that way. Now, this, we talked already about the Reform movement having done away with Tallitot some time ago and then brought it back. Interestingly, Reconstructionist Judaism, which doesn't have or hasn't traditionally had the idea of God, it's personified like in Psalms. So they did away with it. They didn't like this light in a garment, but that now they've brought it back too. So like you were saying, Marilyn, it seems like all the non-Orthodox movements have realized that we've lost a lot by dumping out all this imagery in our scripture and losing the spiritual connection. So it's back in now. It's back in the Reconstructionist prayer book.
There's an alternative interpretation, though, and that's not so much because of this robed in glory and majesty as a going back to ritual as ritual, without the depth of meaning that is being explored right now. And it's a ritual. It's done in Jewish synagogues all the way across the world, and therefore we will now give you the option of, if you choose to do so, of donning the tallit.
Now remember why the Reform movement exists in the first place. Back in 1810 in Germany, the objective was for the middle class people to be more like their Christian brethren, to be their equal. And so when the discussions came about as to what should be done, what should not be done, it was, well, what are we doing in the service that is repetitious? What are we doing that's unimportant? What are we doing that would make us more like everyone else? And so that's where things began to fall by the wayside. Why we don't have a Musaf service? Why do we need to repeat the Amidah again? And they went back and looked at, well, why isn't the prayer, liturgy in the first place? Well, there was something wrong that he added to prevent whatever was happening. Golly gee, things got better again, so let's leave it. It must be doing some good. So that's basic Reform Judaism and the historical background as to why we do what we do.
I think probably it goes even further back to when Hashkalah began, the Enlightenment, and the walls of the ghetto came down and Jews began to assimilate into the modern world.
Well, the 1810 Germany is the essential beginning of Reform.
That I agree, because Hashkalah began earlier. It began with Napoleon.
Well, there were many
later.
Later than 1910?
No, wait, 1810.
1810. When was Napoleon?
Okay, Napoleon was 1803 through, so it's
like
essentially the same time.
Yeah, one right after the
So
other.
there were many things involved, right? Also, the whole rejection of mysticism. The victory of rationality. Yeah. And the Reform movement was aggressive. Let's dump all these Bava Mises, and they're embarrassing. They're archaic. They're irrational. They're illogical.
What else the Reform movement endorsed was the translation of the service from the Hebrew into the vernacular, which would have been the German.
Right. And one of Raphael Hirsch's great achievements was he translated it into German, but he kept the traditional viewpoint. Okay, so another thing about the prayer, we're starting with our obligation in the morning is to God. We're asking our soul to bless God. We're not starting by asking for something that we want. Okay. And as a matter of fact, halachically, there are things that we're not supposed to do before we say this blessing. We're not supposed to do personal related work. We're not supposed to start on a journey. And we're not even supposed to eat, although you can drink water. And you can drink coffee and tea, but without sugar or milk in them, because that's nourishment. Unless you need to do it for health reasons. And the idea is what are your priorities? Your priorities should be...
Wait. Where did these thou shalt nots come from?
These are from the Talmud. Okay. So the rabbi said the focus should be on praising God, not on your own work or other, or other things. Okay, a couple other different sources. The Art Scroll Siddur talks about the Tallit symbolizing the splendor of the commandments. Okay.
Did you want anything to drink?
And the conservative Siddur Sim Shalom talks, and I'm going to read this to you because I want to be sure that it's you understand it. So I'll just read, this is a little paragraph that makes it. The Tallit symbolizes God's enveloping love and concern. In turn, the Talit's fringes, the tzitzit, express our reciprocal commitment to God. Okay? The tzitzit remind us of both the Torah's commandments and the ideas of holiness to which we are called. Indeed, the numerical value of the word tzitzit is 600. You understand by numerical value, each letter in the Hebrew alphabet is a number
Gematria.
also.
Gematria,
Okay?
yeah.
To which we add the 8 strings and 5 knots that comprise each of the 4 fringes. So if you look at the fringes, it has knots and strings. Okay? The tzitzit also serve a spiritual purpose, according to the Gerer rabbi. When one learns the Torah, prays much, and begins to think, I'm truly pious, I overlook nothing in the performance of my religious duties, that's precisely when one transgresses the command that we read when we looked at the V'ahavta. Do not be seduced by your heart, nor led astray by your eyes. Such people said he should look at the tzitzit and be reminded of the need for humility. Okay? All right, so let's go on to the second, unless you want to, any comments about the first sentence?
I don't know the 600.
You don't know the 600? Okay, well don't worry because many of them can only be fulfilled A, in Israel or when the temple was standing. So
Everything,
we
yeah,
got
everything to do with
hundreds
the
not to worry
sacrifices.
about.
Everything to do with the sacrifices or what the high priest would do or anything like that, so
You
yeah.
don't have to worry about it, and in 2 weeks you have to know
It
it.
is interesting though to read through them.
It is. You can go, you can go on
You go
Google and
online.
just put 613 commandments and look through them.
Yeah.
And there are other, I mean, there are other.
Thank you.
There are various scholars even who, I mean, have different versions slightly of the 613, and there are different numbers. So 613 is a traditional number, but it isn't the only one necessarily. Okay, let's go on to the second sentence. Hineni mit'atef b'talit shel tzitzit kedei lekayem mitzvat bori. So here I am. I present myself, wrapping myself in the talit of the tzitzit in order to fulfill the mitzvah of the commandment of my Creator. Kakatuv b'Torah v'asu, and here's what we just read. V'atsu lachem tzitzit al kanfei bigdehem ledoratam, as it is written in Torah, and they will make themselves fringes or put fringes on the corners of their garments for all generations. Okay, so this is the rationale for wearing the talit, and we're saying this as we're getting ready to put this on. We haven't actually put it on yet. This is preparing our minds and our spirits and our souls for what we're about to do. So why don't we wear this in the evening?
I have no idea. I was always wondering that. I've never could
Okay.
figure it out, except for the
Oh,
rabbi.
what do you mean, why do we wear it?
When you go to Friday night services, we don't put them on.
Do
Why
the
not?
other
Did he-
movements put them on?
No.
The only night service we wear is Kol Nidre.
Right.
Is what?
Kol
Nidre.
Nidre. So why? Okay. Now let's go back, because I mean, at the end of the day, I want you to remember the fundamental core. What did we read when we went through the Shema? Okay. What are the purposes of what? Why do we have this thing? Why are we wearing this?
Like God surrounded himself in light.
Yeah.
Well,
We're
that's. But what does the Torah say expressly? Why we are doing this? What is the purpose of these? All right, shall we go back?
Yeah.
Okay. To go back to the sheet that we started with the V'ahavta. Okay. Okay. So put fringes on the corners and. All right. So uritem oto uzartem et kol mitzvot Adonai. And you will see them, and you will be reminded of all the mitzvot and do them. That's what they're there for. We look at them, and we're reminded not to go whoring after other gods and to fulfill the mitzvot. So what's the problem with wearing them at night?
I don't know.
It's
Can't
dark! You can't
Hold on.
see them!
Yeah, excuse me. Electricity? Click.
Well,
yes, you
okay,
can.
but we're talking about the tradition that's evolved.
years.
The idea is they're to look at. So why you don't wear them at night because you wouldn't be able to see them. Now, of course, we can feel them as you point out, but this is the tradition. But just think about the fact that okay, fine, you want to see them at night, great. All right, you can
Like
still
a
wear
candle.
your talit katan, but even if you think it's silly, at least when you're thinking it's silly, it'll remind you that the whole idea is that these are reminders. You see them, you're being reminded about the mitzvot. That's what they're there for. And you're inclined. You know, I just was reminded, a little story that just popped in my mind. When I went to rabbinical school, one of my teachers told me that when he was a boy growing up in Chicago, he wanted to be friends with people, with other boys, and he was young. And so the way that he was asked to show that he was a good guy was to be the lookout when some of the other kids went to a candy store and wanted to steal.
Aiding and
So
abetting.
he went in, and I guess his job was to distract the clerk or whatever. And he was nervous, and he put his hand up, and he felt his kippah. And that reminded him that he shouldn't be doing this, and he ran out of the store. That's the way. Okay. So so it's the same. It's the same kind of idea. If you're feeling or you're seeing these, and you're tempted to do bad things, this goes back to the Musar classes that we have, where we are tempted all the time to, our Yetzer Hara is telling us do this, do that, and so we need some kind of physical reminder all the time, especially when we're tempted. And that's what, so it's not just about going in, I mean, yes, they're being wrapped in light and all that, that's beautiful. It's Kabbalistic, spiritual. But much more pragmatic is the idea that we're putting this on during services because we want to at least be reminded as we're praying about the mitzvot.
Question then, since traditionally in Reform temples, there's a much greater attendance at the Friday night services than there are in the Saturday morning services. And now since it's quite possible to see because we have electricity, and so therefore that commandment or that statement that you can't see them represents a fossilization of what was before, wouldn't it make more sense to have people don the talit at Friday night services?
It very well might, and you could make that argument. You could. I mean, now you may. I was kind of waiting for somebody to ask me, but the rabbi wears it.
That's what I said.
Why is that?
I asked it.
Okay, so at the after about with the advent of reform, the idea also emerged that we, for kavod for the congregation, sort of out of respect for the congregation, we want the prayer leader to be properly attired, and so at least symbolically, the prayer leader should be wearing a talit because it's part of the prayer uniform, if you will.
Wait, dissenting opinion?
Go ahead.
The rabbi traditionally isn't the prayer leader
Well,
then.
okay, you're
then
right.
That would mean
That's
that the
right.
prayer leader, what do they call it? The tzibur?
The shaliach tzibur,
Would be the
messenger of the
yes,
congregation. Or
would be the
right,
one
or
to
the
wear
agent.
the talit
That's
rather
right.
than the rabbi,
That's-
and the cantor wears one too, doesn't
Well, and that's right, and and of course, so when we have all these mixed metaphors and symbols, you're right. I mean, the rabbi is not the prayer leader. You're absolutely right. The rabbi is the teacher. And the rabbi gets up and gives the Devar Torah. Okay, but in the Reform movement, that we've developed another tradition. Okay, so what about wearing a talit?
Take the whole thing.
Thank you.
Should a rabbi wear a talis while performing a wedding or a funeral?
They do.
Well, in fact, I wore one. I officiated a wedding, and I wore it. Well, it's not a prayer service. We were saying blessings, but it wasn't a prayer service. So that also was part of sort of trying to infuse it with a religious or sacred feeling. But tradition. Now, actually, a funeral is a little different example because there's actually, the Talmud says you are not to wear. Can anybody guess why you can't wear? Very interesting. Why are we not supposed to wear talit in a funeral?
Well, it renders you when you go to a cemetery, you are unclean, and that's why when you come to the door of a house where they're sitting shiva, you wash because you're traditionally cleaning off.
That's a good answer. But it's not the one I'm going to say.
How about the light?
No, this is okay. So this goes back to the fringes. It's all about the fringes. The idea is that the people in the you are making the people in the cemetery
Oh, I've heard
jealous.
they're so jealous
Because
they
you can fulfill the mitzvah
And
and
they
they can't.
cannot.
So you do not, so
So you
rabbi
don't
does
wear
not
it
wear
in the cemetery because it's disrespectful to the
the
souls
dead?
to the souls who are there. You're
That's
you're
interesting.
showing off.
How about in the chapel cemetery? They won't see.
Okay. All right. So let's go on to one other thing. This idea of the blue thread. Now, as we talked about this in Torah study, where the blue came from. The blue came. We think it came from a snail, and it was very expensive to produce the color blue that went into the blue thread. I mean, why don't we actually have the blue threads anymore? Well, first because we don't. I guess they can't find the snail.
Actually, I think they have rediscovered it.
A murex, called a murex snail.
Yes.
But the point that I wanted to make is that, traditionally, or in the ancient world, this would be something that only the very rich could afford. It would be a sign of nobility and wealth. But for us, this is a universal requirement. So it's a democracy, democratization, and the idea that or you could say it's an idea that we're all priests. We're a nation of priests. So we don't have separate rituals for the priests wearing only the blue thread.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
I've seen in the Chabad temple on Saturday morning that an unmarried man over the age of 13 does not wear a tallit.
Yes, actually, the tradition there is that if you are not or have never been married, you do not wear a tallis.
Why?
I don't know.
Because if this is pertaining to everyone to remind us and things like that, then I would think a single man, more tempted to sin than a married man,
It
would
could
be even more so inclined.
You could be right. So maybe
to
I haven't.
wear
I
this.
can. It's interesting. I can ask. I'll ask somebody. But just I threw out a speculation here. Maybe it's because if you're not married, you are unable to fulfill the mitzvah of pru revu, and therefore you shouldn't be wearing a tallit, which we're going to see in a moment.
Wait a minute.
Actually,
Wait,
so hold on.
Divorced, you
So
can
wait.
wear it.
what if you have been?
Widowed, you can wear it though, right?
What did I say? If you are not and have never been married,
Have not.
then you couldn't have children,
Right.
and then you
So
couldn't.
what, wait.
You couldn't fulfill that mitzvah yet.
So a sterile man could never wear a tallit then?
I
He could
don't-
be married.
Yeah, but
could
he
be married.
but he
and
can't
wear the
fulfill the
tallit.
mitzvah
Okay.
for vu.
All right.
or vu.
I don't know.
Would
I don't
not
know.
such things 100 years ago as would make any difference.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that the religion picks up these beliefs and practices that are then carried on into an age where perhaps they are no longer appropriate or useful or needed.
Which of course is the foundation of reform, right?
Judaism.
Okay. And yet we found you lose a lot when you just throw away things that quote aren't rational, because religion isn't about rationality. That's what science is about, right?
Right.
Okay, let's go on. And so we haven't put the tallit on yet. This is all, this is sort of all the background that should be going through our minds in the few seconds that we're preparing to put it on. And so we just said that we read, here I am, I'm ready to wrap myself in a tallit, as it says in the Torah. Okay, and then the next sentence, Kashem she'ani mitkaseh betalit ba'olam hazeh, just as I am covering myself in the talit in this world, ken tiskeh nishmati lehit labesh betalit na'a le'olam haba bagan Eden. So, as I do it in this world, so may my soul merit to wear a beautiful tallit in the next world. So this is a expressly Kabbalistic idea of the connection between this world and the next world, and actions, connecting. And we're hoping that we'll have eternal life, that we have a place in the world to come. And so again, wrapping ourselves in the tallit and the mitzvot and so on, we're hoping that this will be to our merit. Now Now, one of the interesting things in here are the words that are used for souls. If you look, it says nishmati, and in the preceding sentence, it said. Then we have a reference to nefesh and nishmati and neshama. Anyway, there are three concepts in Kabbalah for the soul at three different levels. You have the neshama, you have the ruach, and you have the nefesh. And the nefesh is the lowest of the levels, sort of the animalistic part of the soul. And the neshama is the highest, the only part that's really the human part, the part that understands the commandments and can connect with God. Now, in modern Hebrew, when you say, how are you? You say, ma nishma. How is your nefesh? How is your neshama? And when we talked about in the Musar class, we talked about the Elohai Neshama. I think I did that prayer right. Elohai Neshama Shantat Tabi. The soul within me is pure. We're referring to the Neshama. So the idea in this prayer that we just read, we're saying, may my Neshama, may the highest element of my soul be worthy of being in the world to come and wearing this Tallit. So we have a Kabbalistic connection in this word.
Strikes me as somewhat chauvinistic.
Why is that?
Well, because women don't wear the tallit.
Well, you're assuming that that's true.
That's in
Okay.
use.
Okay. All
I
right.
believe that.
So now we have just said these few sentences. After having already done matovu, now we're preparing ourselves for the service. And we've thought about all these things, our soul elevation and God creating the world and our and being reminded of the tzitzit, which is why we're doing it, and the commandments and so on. All right, so now we're ready. And I'm going to demonstrate this when we're done, so I can put it all together for you. But for the moment, we're putting the tallit. Actually, well, Dave, you're sort of holding it in front of you, but assuming that we know this by heart, you would actually be putting it from over your head from behind. I'll show you how to do that. Okay, but so we're in any event. Let's just say we're holding it and we're preparing to put it on. However, it is we're holding it. And we're saying Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahitatef batzitzit. Okay, so it's the standard rabbinic formula for the blessing. The blessings always has, we talked about, I think in the first session, always have to have a reference to God and a reference to God's authority. That's what makes it a legitimate formulaic blessing. Okay. And so referencing that and the commandment to wrap ourselves in the fringes. Where is that commandment?
What?
Where's the commandment that we're just referring to? It's
in
the V'ahavta, right? We started with that. Right? It's in the V'ahavta. It's in the book of Numbers. That's where that part of the Shema or the V'ahavta comes from, the book of Numbers. Okay, so we keep referring to, whether we're doing the Shema or we're doing this, we keep referring to this commandment about the fringes. Okay. Now, I want to, this is the book, I think I told you at the beginning of the class, I've got a whole series of these volumes. And this is the volume on the Birchot HaShachar, the morning blessings. And as I'm preparing the material, I'm taking much of it from here. And there are several different scholars. One is approaching historically, one is approaching linguistically, one is approaching from liturgically, and they all have commentaries. And some of them I thought were too long for me to just put in my notes and read, so I thought we could take turns. There were certain passages that I thought would be helpful. So I would like to ask somebody to take this book, please, and read. Marilyn, I'm going to give this to you. This is from David Ellenson. Now, David Ellenson is Rabbi Dr. David Ellenson is the head of HUC. But he's also a scholar of liturgy, especially the modern Reform and Reconstructionist, non-Orthodox liturgy. So he's one of the commentators in this book. So if you could read, please, Marilyn.
We're on the page.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see. That's what I'm trying to remember where I wanted this from. How about these two paragraphs?
Starting here?
The same
Okay.
forces.
The same forces that caused contemporary reform to readmit this meditation have impacted Reconstructionism also. The influence of Jewish renewal figures such as Zalman Shacher Shalomi, Arthur Green, and Arthur Waskow upon Reconstructionism has led the movement to reincorporate personal God imagery as well as non-rationalistic and even mystical dimensions of Jewish tradition to a degree that would have been unthinkable for Kaplan. Consequently, its current Kol HaNeshama has forthrightly restored this passage, positively affirming its inspiring description of how, quote, how God, robed in splendor, wrapped in light, created the world, unquote. Finally, this phrase, which was absent from older conservative prayer books, reappears in the American Siddur Sim Shalom. The Israeli conservative liturgy, Siddur Va'ani Tefilati, however, replaces it with precise directions on how to don the Tallit and an explanation of why it is worn only in the morning. As a sign of its newly found impulse toward gender equality and its historical commitment to halakha, SVT contends that the Jewish legal tradition not only allows women to wear the tallit, but even obligates them to, quote, to observe all the commandments, including the commandment of the tzitzit, unquote. What is, SVT is Siddur Va'ani Tefilati.
Right.
Okay. That was interesting.
Okay. So, again, he's saying that we're seeing, as we talked about at the very beginning, this sort of movement back toward reincorporating the more mystical aspects of these traditions.
Is it indeed mystical?
There's something here that really bothers me,
What's that?
because I am a feminist, I'll tell you that right now.
Okay.
When they say, who has sanctified us with his commandments, it's always him, it's always his, it's always no matter
Okay.
what.
What in Hebrew do you think it should say?
I don't know.
Okay. So, like many languages,
Spanish, French, Italian, Romanian.
well,
I know just
but
saying.
okay. We do not. The Hebrew does not have a neuter word. What's the word I'm looking for? Case. Thank you. Or gender.
Gender,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. There's no it in Hebrew. So you either have to, and of course we have this problem in English too to a certain extent. When do we just say his/her all the
That
time,
drives me
or do we
insane.
say their to try to be inclusive, which is grammatically
Or
incorrect? But
S/HE.
you know, so the default in Hebrew is the masculine when it is intended to include everyone. It doesn't mean his versus her. It just means there's no other way to do it unless you create some artificial construct.
And you go back to Old English. English is spoken between the 8th century and the 14th century. The same
But English
method
has changed it.
was used, and its modern connotation that goes to his, her. But English is essentially is the same way, and it followed the same pattern, even though English has neuters.
Okay, so let's go on to, we've just put it on, said the blessing, and there's a meditation having just done this. Right? Maya kar hastecha Elohim. How valuable, precious is your loving kindness, God. Uvnei Adam b'tzel kanafecha hisayun. The mankind takes, usually it's translated as takes refuge in the, the shade or the shadow of your wings.
Okay, wait a minute. Here, the Hebrew, Uvenei Adam, and the children of Adam, is a much more gender neutral than to say mankind, because you can say humankind. It would have been better to say, as a more gender neutral, the
Okay.
children of Adam.
Fine. Or humankind.
Or humankind. But, okay, I think Carol's point is, and I agree with her, that these vestiges of gender in language are not just have import, have meaning, have things that they say to us as feminists that no longer resonate. And therefore we react, sometimes less strongly, sometimes more strongly, when we see a translation that could just as easily have been made gender neutral as to say mankind. Mankind doesn't include me.
Which again goes back to the problem of translation. You've got to go back to what was the original text and what did it originally mean, which is why today, for example,
Uvenei Adam.
which is today why, for example, Bible scholars go back and say, well, the children of Israel, when they left Egypt, crossed the Red Sea because of the mistranslation of Gam Suf.
It's the Sea of Reeds.
The
Yeah.
Reed Sea.
Yeah.
That I know.
And it's, so again, it's the issue of translation. What did the person who was looking at the original intend or think when he wrote down the other language?
Okay, what is the date of this translation? Where does this translation
Isn't that the
come
newest
from?
prayer book?
When you,
You know what? I may have put that in myself.
I don't really
Instead of
know if-
humankind, because when I think mankind, I am not thinking gender
No.
limitation. To me,
And I don't
mankind
take it as
and
gender
humankind
either.
is synonymous.
Last-
Just like the man in human is not gender
yeah,
either.
like last week you said something to me about, well, what did it mean in the American dictionary or something? I don't know what it says about mankind, but I don't think it's referring to only people with penises. I really don't. I mean, to me, mankind is everybody that's in the world. I
Okay.
I beg to
I don't know.
differ.
All right.
What
Well,
well, what does it say in the
What do
dictionary
current
then?
textbooks do?
Because
Let me go look it up
to
on
me,
my-
mankind would just be, you mean to tell me in your mind, you actually believe when you say mankind, you're only talking about men?
I believe it's a term of exclusivity when it should be a term of inclusivity. Inclusiveness?
Again-
Inclusiveness.
Again, it goes back to the
Inclusivity.
convention of by default male.
I would like to know what current textbooks do. They say.
They're-
what do they say?
okay. Well, how
Okay,
does if
the
you want to?
Reconstructionists go out of their way to make things gender
I'm not
neutral.
Well,
talking
mind
about
you,
dudes,
they are
I'm
much more modern
talking
than
about
any
our
of the other
kids that
traditional.
go to school.
Well, yes, but okay, we just
Oh,
came out with
grandchildren.
a new translation. This what is it called? The whatever, the blue book.
Mishkan
That we're using, and therefore these vestiges need no longer
Okay.
exist.
What does it say? How does it translate?
Is it even there?
Is it? Well, let's.
But
May I look?
this is what I don't know what this is. This is Accurate and Reliable Dictionary, a free English online dictionary. Mankind, the human race, man taken collectively, but then it continues
Uh-huh.
on definition. Man, as distinguished from women. The
Bingo.
male portion of
Bingo.
So that's an
Then
alternative.
non-human
That's an
feelings.
alternative definition.
Yeah, there's three different. There's three.
Okay, so you can choose.
I
You can choose the one that you want.
Mankind, not womanly, masculine, bold, cruel. And then another one is all the inhabitants of the earth. All the world loves a lover. She always used humankind because mankind seemed to slight the woman.
Oh, you go, woman.
Okay, so Marilyn, are you right? I don't see this
all in
meditation
there.
This gives
in
all
here.
definitions. It goes all ways.
Would it be in the back as one of the alternative prayers to say or something like that?
I don't know. Okay, but let's. Well, I want to get through at least this verse. Okay, so Yirviyun mideshen betek. We're getting to some feminist references here. You're gonna like this. Yirviyun mideshen betecha. Okay, so they will be sated. They will be with the food of your house. The sense here is like over. It's not like overeating, but it's like your cup overflows. Okay, you will have so much
Much as you need.
food. Not that you'll get sick, but I mean all of what I mean. Like all of your
You will not want more.
Right. You know, all of your needs will be met. Nachala danecha tashkem, and the river of your delights you'll be given to us to drink from. Okay. Ki imcha makor chaim, because with you is the source of life. Be'orcha nira or, and with you, or in you, or through you, through your light, I should say, through your light or in your light, we see light. Now, what does that mean? What do you think that means? Any ideas?
Because we love you so much and understand you, we begin to see your ideals.
You know, we develop an understanding. Light shines upon what it is that you're trying to convey to us. And so now we can see it.
Or understand it.
Okay. Or maybe it's you enable us to understand and appreciate and feel. Mishochastacha liyododecha. Okay, so how did I translate that? So extend, reach out somehow your chesed to those who know you or who acknowledge you, which of course we would be including ourselves because we're saying this prayer. V'tzikadcha la'yishrei lev, and we talked this morning in Torah study about tzedek, okay, your righteousness to L'lishrei lev, to the uprights of heart, to those who do well. So we put we do good. We put the Tallit on, and we're communicating with God, and we're acknowledging all the blessings, the abundance, and we're acknowledging the source of light, and we're asking as part of the people who know God to be able to continue to receive these blessings. We got another little section to read here. So your turn, Steve.
Yeah, okay.
So if you would read Elliot Dorff, who's at the tassels here.
Okay. The tassels, tzitzit, symbolize two Jewish convictions. Each one is made of four strands of thread that are pulled through a small hole at the edges of the tallit, resulting in 8 strands hanging from each edge. So how many strands do you have?
So we should have 8. Should have 8 strands
Okay,
there.
so it's pulling from two. Oops, this is getting vermished here.
Which we'll talk about what part of the procedure of putting on Tallit is to check and make sure that they're not tangled and they're the correct number of knots. Okay, go ahead. Yes, we've established there are 8.
One of 4 threads, the shamash, is longer than the others, and it can be wrapped around the others to make the tassel.
Yes, we have one longer.
Okay. One double knot using all 8 strands. The 4 threads doubled over through the eyelet is the first near the edge of the garment.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then 4 other double knots are tied to make the tassel. And we can see there are 4 other knots.
Yeah.
The shamash is wrapped around the other 7 strands, first 7, then 8, then 11, and finally 13 times. So each one's larger.
There must be talking about this part
Yeah,
here.
the number of wraps.
Okay.
Hebrew letters have numerical equivalents in the order from Aleph equals 1, Beit 2, and so on. 15, 7 plus 8 is the numerical equivalent to the first 2 letters of God's names, Yud Hey, and 11 is the numerical equivalent to the second 2 letters of God's name, Vav Hey. 13 is the numerical equivalent to the Hebrew name echad, one. So the tassels symbolize the central theological affirmations of Judaism. God is one, in addition to the Hebrew word for tassels, tzitzit, has a numerical equivalent of 600, which together with the 8 threads and the 5 knots make 613, the number of commandments the tradition counts in the Torah. Thus, the tassels are indicate that we are to obey God's commandments. Indeed, we are to wrap ourselves and our lives in the holiness they bring as a blessing for putting it on, the Tallit says.
Okay, so you see, rather than just throwing it over our shoulders and not thinking about it, what we're actually doing, in addition to being reminded, is this is actually a representation of the unity of God and of the commandments. I mean, numerically, these knots mean things, and the number of strands mean things. And by extension, if one of these strands breaks, then you shouldn't use the tallis.
Could you fix it?
Well, it could be repaired, but I mean, while it's broken. And in fact, symbolically, when someone dies, you cut
Right.
it
They're
and
Tallit.
bury it with them.
They're Tallit.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I just want to say, so it's not just a piece of cloth and it's got some strings on it and we wear it for some weird reason. Okay. Each of these things has significance. All right, Carol, would you read?
I passed that.
Okay, sorry. Barbara, would you read page 62?
62.
Ellen Hoffman.
There's a here, I've got to get it. Sorry.
You can pass down a Tallit though.
Okay.
Sure.
Frankel, a woman's voice, but
Yes.
starting now?
No.
62?
E. Hoffman, 62.
I see L. Hoffman, J. Hoffman. I see
Okay.
Frankel.
Read Frankel. Maybe I put the wrong name in.
Frankel, but it's just
E is Ellen. So would you please read Frankel?
a woman's voice?
Yes.
Okay. Psalm after this blessing. I don't know. It just starts in. I don't
Oh, here. Let me.
don't think
Do you
it's
have the
good.
last 2 paragraphs? Let me look at it. Maybe I made
No,
an
I don't
error in
know.
my notes here about where I wanted
I
you to
don't
read
know
from.
what you read because it just kind of like starts right in.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Psalm 36, please.
Thank you. Okay.
So I mean, as a lead-in, what have we just read? We've just read about streams and food and support, sustenance, chesed. Okay, and with that.
Psalm 36, following the blessing for putting on the Tallit, introduces several metaphors, all of which have traditionally been associated with women. God's kindness is compared to wings, under whose shadow God's children take refuge. The
Shekhinah.
the Shekinah,
That means the Shekhinah. It
God's
comes.
feminine aspect,
Well, okay, the presence of God. The same word, by the way, is used for neighborhood.
is typically depicted as a winged presence sheltering Israel from harm. God is then described as one who nourishes us with choice food and gives us drink from a stream of delights. The Hebrew root of this last term, adikah, a lot of these are just in the Hebrew, is the same word as Eden and means sensual pleasure. Indeed, when God tells Sarah that she is to give birth to a son at 90 years of age, she protests, "Am I to have enjoyment with my husband so old?" God here promises us that these miraculous garments of prayer will afford us spiritual pleasure. Keep going, yeah?
Yes, at the end of her
The
comments.
psalm next speaks about God's fountain of life, a phrase that has been adopted by Jewish feminists as a divine name with particular feminine resonance. More than any other image, water in the forms of wells, springs, and other sources has been associated with women. Rebecca and Rachel meet their lovers at the village well. Miriam's life-giving well sustains the Israelites through the wilderness. So too, God's loving kindness promises to nourish and enlighten us as we journey toward the source of being, sheltered under the divine wings.
Okay, so I'm suggesting to you that as you say this meditation, there are many, at least traditionally interpreted, feminist or feminine connotations to this.
I may be the only one here who feels this, but every time I see wings on something, Christianity is brought to mind, not Judaism. But
Huh.
Judaism is full of
Where do
wings.
you
Why is
think
that?
they got it?
But
Are you talking
Yeah,
angels
but-
with the wings? Is that what you mean? Or, yeah.
every time I see wings, I don't think of Judaism at all.
Okay, so, Steve is absolutely right. Give an example of something with wings that you're thinking about.
Well, it's
That you identify with Christianity.
mobiles,
The
any
double
kind of
piece.
objects that you see.
Well, the
in the
depictions
But we
of
are
angels
commanded
and everything.
not to
Angels,
have
that's-
graven
angels.
images in our midst, and therefore we do not have pictures on the
Thank
wall
you.
and statues, and that's why you don't see it in the
Well,
synagogue.
Thank you.
but, okay,
But
But
the
the
cherubim.
association is there with
But,
Christianity,
okay,
not Judaism.
well, but that's our fault. That's another failing of Jewish education, because throughout Torah, throughout Tanakh, you have references to wings. You know, Ezekiel depicts God as a winged. So does Isaiah. And as you said, there's the cherubim over the ark have wings. When you see
Because the ark is sheltered under the touching wings of the cherubim, but to give the devil his due, that concept of the cherubim predates Judaism.
okay, but it's not Christian. It's not Christian to the exclusion of Jewish.
That's true. Though, if you think of one as supplanting the other, when you think of wings, yeah, what comes to mind are the winged angels.
Right, that's what I thought of.
Garbed
Yeah.
in white, with the halos
But,
and the
but
wings
my
on
point
the
is
back.
that is okay. Now I don't know about the halo, but at least the winged angels is in Tanakh.
But that's funny.
That's in the
See a lot of
prophets.
Christian things with the wings. where
There are
Yes.
many, many
Yes.
things that we associate with Christianity because of our culture
They took everything.
and because of okay. All right, so let's go to the last part of the Tallit blessing. Vayhi ratzon milfanecha, may it be favorable to you, Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, our Adonai, our God, and God of our forefathers, ancestors, predecessors, however you want to say it, Ve'imotenu.
See, but it doesn't say Ve'imotenu, it just says
Okay, but
Avotenu.
inclusive. Okay. Shetehei chashuva mitzvat zo keilu ki yam tiha bechol perata'a this is kind of not modern Hebrew, but kiduk daha v'ka'unotacha v'tarayag mitzvot hataliyim ba. Amen. Salah. Okay, may it be your will, Hashem, our God, our ancestors, that this commandment of tassels be treated as though I fulfilled it in every respect, and all 613. This is where I get the idea that maybe this is why an unmarried man can't, this is my speculation, perhaps can't wear a tallit traditionally because the pru-revu, just an idea, it just came from, you may be totally wrong. So we're finishing putting on the tallit blessing with this prayer, this hope that by doing this mitzvah and being reminded of all the mitzvot, we will sort of get extra credit for having fulfilled them all. Now this is not included in any of the liberal Siddurim. It's sort of over the top, I guess, from the view of the authors of the liberal ones. And also there's as I alluded to earlier, a disagreement about whether there are 613 mitzvot, which are the 613, and do we even want to? Do we want to have sacrifices and so on?
Wait a minute. Okay, that this commandment of tassels be considered as though I fulfilled it. What is it? In every respect, detail, and purpose.
Let's see what the Hebrew says.
You could say his commandments and then you
Well,
have to fit.
it being the commandment.
Them,
This commandment of tassels
It,
be considered as
them.
though I fulfilled it. What is
Okay.
it?
It would be the commandment.
Right, misvote? I'm not looking
All-
at it, I'm just guessing.
No,
they may just
because
be,
in
uh,
every respect, and the 613 commandments that are related to it.
well, the it,
It's not masculine.
Yes.
well,
The it.
related to it, the Torah blessing. I would
There
say.
are not 613 commandments that are related to the Torah blessing.
Well, if you could say, not the Torah blessing, I'm sorry, all the mitzvot in Torah. I think the
Torah.
idea is that, again, just as we are looking at the tzitzit to be reminded of all 613, so here we're hoping that by fulfilling wishful thinking,
Then half the world wants to get a hold of me.
What if, oh my.
I wish
It's
my phone
important.
rang like that, then I'd hear it.
we're hoping that by fulfilling this mitzvah, we'll get credit for all of them. I think that's what really the point here. And so that seems like it's a very over the top wish, but okay. So putting this all together, how do we actually put this on? Would you? I'll stand up and I will tilt this.
But it wasn't done.
So,
Well, it's been 7 years.
So you have one, so you know.
all right. So of course we do the beginning meditation, and what we don't do, start there, is wear it. And this is harder to demonstrate with the bigger one, but some people you'll see sort of just wear it like this, like a
Right.
collar
Yes.
or
Yeah,
whatever.
because that's the size they are.
Well, the problem with it, is that you have to have them. The tradition is to have 2 fringes in front and 2 in back, 4-cornered garment. So if you wear it sort of like a shawl, you have all 4 fringes in the front. Okay, so that's not kosher, you could say. All right. So the correct way.
So none of the talit that the temple provides then are kosher.
The correct way,
Because they're all like shawls.
all right,
No
would be
temple. But you don't need such a big one.
you start like this. All right, you say the blessing,
From the desert,
and then
Lawrence of Arabia.
you pull these over like this, over your shoulders, and wrap it, and you throw it over your left
God,
shoulder,
how do you do
and make
that?
like a tent or a sack for just like a second or two. And this is the idea of being totally enwrapped in this, and it also helps with the meditation. Then, after that's done,
What, and muss up my hair?
No, wait, it reminds me of
and you
Lawrence
can
of
put it over your
Arabia.
shoulders,
Where's your camel?
and
Well,
I've written one
but
thing.
you can't,
this is hard for me to
but
do in this
you need-
constrained space.
but to do that, you need one of those very large ones.
Right.
Not-
Right. In fact, this one isn't
So-
even
Right,
large enough.
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
Really?
so how
So,
about
but the idea is being totally enwrapped.
I understand,
Okay.
I understand. Then why do they make the small one?
What?
Because I've yet to
Just come with the rope
see
cord.
a woman's talit of that size. They tend to be,
Smaller.
The talit
they
gadol.
tend to be more like shawls, and that's how they're usually worn. They're worn like shawls.
Yeah.
Unless you get too hot and then you gather them all up and they only cover your neck.
Okay. So once again, just to wrap up here, we have.
Wait a minute, Art, smooth down your yellow
Oh.
tape.
Thank you.
What is that? Is that my phone?
Yeah.
Is it a net?
No. We have. I'll tell you in a minute. We have. Something that
My brother.
normally just takes a few seconds, or if it gets any thought at all, and yet. If you really think about it or you study it, it's infused with all of this symbolism that could give us much more spirituality and meaning as we then begin to say the other parts of the service. It's a very deep tradition. Now, the next thing that I want to go into next time is the tefillin blessings, which have their own the wrapping, and why leather and all these sorts of things. And we may then get into the morning blessings after that.
It's been
But-
lots of years since I laid tefillin. If we do that, could I bring my tefillin and put it on?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
Sure.
that would
E-
be
e-
wonderful.
Even though it's
What's that?
Shabbat, I
He'd bring
really,
his
This is
tefillin.
a learning exercise, right? For sure. And I encourage the women to do that too, if you can get a hold of some tefillin. And we'll all do it together
I will
and
bring
study
2
it.
sets then, because I have mine and my grandfather's.
Okay.
Did you ever see a woman put on tefillin
Yes.
when you were at?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. In fact, there was a picture in the CC in the program. Where was this? One of the pictures of one of my colleagues, a woman rabbi, who went to my school, and she laid tefillin, and the picture of that was in either the program or maybe it was in the whatever was sent around afterwards, after the conference. So we can
Okay.
document that if you want. Okay, anybody have any comments or thoughts about anything we've covered today?
No.
This-
Where is this ritual about how you put on this thing? Did this come from Talmud again?
that I
Right,
don't know where
making a
that
tent
comes
out of it
from.
and-
It's referenced in both in the book that we use today, and actually you can go on the internet and you type in how to put on tallis, and there are various versions of it showing that too. In fact,
Okay.
there's some right at the Kotel where people are doing it,
Okay.
and there's a little film. I didn't show the women part of the Kotel
Of
doing
course
that. Yeah. Okay, so thank you and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Wonderful.